wedding cakes that have lots of herbs on become a very lovely smelling thing in the wedding venue. So the more flowers and herbs that you add, the more beautiful smelling the cake is. Hello, I'm Poppy and I run a company called the Hazelbury Kitchen where I specialise in bespoke wedding cakes. This is an example of one of my wedding cakes, and you'll see that my style is very natural, very organic looking, with a particular focus on using edible flowers, edible herbs, and a very rustic, organic finish to it, which you'll see that I've made these rustic edges to each tier just to add to that natural look. This is a full buttercream cake, and most of my cakes are full buttercream. Sometimes I will do naked cakes where there's no buttercream, or sometimes there's a thin layer around them, which is called semi-naked. So this cake is covered in flowers from my garden, and it's very important when you're finding the flowers to add to the cake that you only add edible flowers. These flowers are, for example, we've got violas, we have got lavender, we've got daisies, we have got salvia, we've got hardy geraniums and roses. So they're all okay to consume. It's very important that if you are adding flowers to a cake that you don't add any poisonous flowers for obvious reasons. So for the likes of foxgloves or delphiniums, however beautiful they are, they're not very good for cakes or consumption. So it's best to stick with ones that you can fully consume. So I'm going to add a few more petals here and there and a few extra flowers just to bring it alive a little bit more. And these are all seasonal flowers, so out at the moment, and obviously grown in Britain, grown in my garden. And I try and add the flavours to be as seasonal as possible as well. So flavours that we've got in here, we've got a raspberry and white chocolate for the top tier, we've got a apple and blackberry for the middle tier, and we've got a classic Victoria sponge for the bottom tier with seasonal jam. So I try and add in nice fun fruity flavours where I can, just to add to the seasonal vibe, adding some mint here just to bring a little bit of zing. And wedding cakes that have lots of herbs on become a very lovely smelling thing in the wedding venue. So the more flowers and herbs that you add, the more beautiful smelling the cake is. So I'm just going to add a few more little bits of petals and flowers as we go. So I'm adding some more daisies here. So when you're picking flowers to add to a wedding cake, it's important that you pick ones that are fully lovely in bloom, but not ones that are starting to wilt or anything like that, just so you've got nice stable flowers. So there are some flowers that obviously won't work just because they're too fragile to use. So it's important to find ones that are nice and sturdy. Lavenders are a really good example because they don't really flop. Lovely little tight roses work really well as well. And then obviously ones that you can use petals on just to stick here and there, just to add little pops of colour. In England, obviously, the wedding cake season is generally in the summer where it's warmer months. And with a buttercream finish, you have to be a little bit careful with the weather and buttercream potentially melting. So it's very important to have your wedding cake to be as stable as possible. So I have an intricate system of dowels within each tier, just to create legs for each tier to then sit on, so it's not likely to collapse. And I also crumb coat the whole cake in a layer of white chocolate ganache, just to keep that stability. Because if you think about white chocolate, it doesn't melt as quickly as butter, so it just adds that lovely firm robustness just to keep the cake upright for the duration of your wedding. So it's very important just to make sure that your cake is as stable as possible, if not more important than its looks and its flavour. Just adding a few more little roses here and there. It's lovely to use ones that are actually in bud still, just to have that real dark pop of colour come through. And I think it's finished. So here we go, the finished article. A lovely 3-tier wedding cake covered in edible flowers from my garden. Thank you.